Okay, everybody, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. So thank you all for attending. Welcome to our board education seminar regarding annual meetings. I'm Danielle Frederick. I'm one of the community association managers, and I also help with our new business development team. I am here tonight with Samantha Brevard. She's going to be helping with our Zoom and running that for us. So a couple of things before we start with the presentation, just some housekeeping items. You will be muted throughout the duration of the presentation. If you have a question, put it in the chat. You should see that on the bottom of your screen, depending on what kind of device you're using. We will try to answer those questions throughout the presentation, but if we don't get to all of them, we'll have some time at the end that we can do a Q&A as well. So we do have a gift card. We'll do a gift card drawing at the end of the presentation for two $50 Visa gift cards. So make sure you stick around for that. I am going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. So we're joined tonight by two wonderful ladies. The first is Kelly Elmore. She is a principal with KSN Law Firm, which is located in Indianapolis. She's been practicing law since 2005, and she's been with KSN since 2012. She graduated from DePaul University in Greencastle, and then she attended law school in DePaul University in Chicago. Kelly is both a member of the Indiana State Bar and the Illinois State Bar. In 2017 and 2018, she was selected as an emerging lawyer in Illinois, which is made up of the top 2% of lawyers who are 40 or younger, or who have been admitted to the practice of law for 10 years or less and have proven themselves professional, ethical, and experienced at an early age in their legal career. She has published many publications and podcasts. They are about various topics with COA and HOA management, and you can find a lot of those at the KSN website at ksnlaw.com. So thank you, Kelly, so much for being here. We appreciate it. And then our other presenter tonight is Miss Leah Mesmore. She is a regional manager with Kirkpatrick Management. She has 11 years experience in property management. She joined Kirkpatrick in 2012 as a community association manager, and she was promoted in 2018 as a regional manager. She currently manages 5 associations herself, and then she oversees the staff of about 6 community association managers, which manage more than 50 associations. She, in 2016, received her certification from CAI for a Certified Manager of Community Associations, and then she followed that up by getting her Association Management Specialist designation as well. Just recently, Leah received her Professional Community Association Manager designation. We call that PCAM for short. This is the highest certification you could get in community management. There are only 7 people in the state of Indiana who actually have this designation. So we are very proud and lucky to have Leah on our staff who got this accreditation. To complete this, her PCAM, she had to do a case study, which included many different topics on property management services, such as enforcing association rules, preparing budgets and financial reports, understanding legal obligations, and understanding insurance requirements. So with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leah so that she can start the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate that. Thank you everyone for attending tonight and taking time out of your day and your personal time to join us tonight. I like to call this your training day with KMC. And this is just the 3rd for this year of further education for board members, and we appreciate you joining. As a board member, you've joined the board to serve your neighbors, and you're focused on the welfare of your association, and it shows by participating tonight. And you must admit that you did not know everything, and you probably won't know everything being a board member, and thus you rely on either KMC or your legal representatives such as KSN Law, or your committees, or your consultants for large projects. And even though you are relying on them, this further education helps. And with this education is always dependent still on the board's willingness to do what is right and work together for the best interest of the association. When I started with Kirkpatrick Management in the fall of 2012, it was right around the heart of when most annual meetings are. And at that time, I was managing one of the condo associations, and I had a person join the board the same time that I was joining KMC. And he came on as a member of at large of a 88 unit condo community. And both of us, worked getting further education. He took further education classes from CAI, which is the Community Association Institute, and also from KMC. And with that, he is now a board president of that community. They have a reserve that's over 400,000 for future projects. And they also have a healthy operating budget. But the board worked together, and I hope that you will as well with these further education classes that we offer. So starting out with our topic tonight, which is annual meetings, and we'll get started with that. So what is an annual meeting? Sometimes homeowners think that an annual meeting is a time to come and discuss what is not being done and what is being done at the community that they do not agree with. But overall, an annual meeting is specific of what it is for your community. And that starts with looking at your bylaws or your documents to what is an annual meeting. So in regards to annual meetings in 2020 and 2021, it's been quite different because we have dealt with meetings on Zoom, sometimes meeting in person, especially last year, that was very rare. And then some associations have done a hybrid of meeting in person, but at the same time, allowing meetings via Zoom. At this time, I'm going to have Kelly talk further about having annual meetings via Zoom due to the governor's executive order, and what does that mean for your association? Kelly?
Okay, thank you. So as Leah said, we certainly experienced quite a different year in this past year with the pandemic, and many homeowner and other community type associations had to pivot and quickly try to figure out how to best serve the association residents and still be able to conduct association business, despite the fact that we were not able to gather in large groups and initially any groups. And initially, many of the executive orders coming out of Indiana and other jurisdictions were very clear with prohibitions on size of gatherings that were and were not recommended. And we all went into, I think, early and mid to last year of a phase of all meetings moved into the virtual realm, where meetings were conducted by various platforms, including Zoom and other online resources. And while I think it was at first something it took a little while to get used to, I think many associations very well adapted and actually realized some of the benefits of allowing members to participate electronically. Where we are today, there is not currently an order in place in Indiana that bars or prohibits owners from gathering in large places. However, as we're all acutely aware, we are still in a pandemic situation. And based upon CDC guidelines, there is still very, very strong recommendations regarding social distancing, wearing masks, trying to avoid large groups despite vaccination status. So I think what we're going to see continue, at least for the foreseeable future, is associations continuing to take advantage of the virtual meetings. And as Leah said, some associations right now are still doing a hybrid type situation where you can allow meetings if people do feel comfortable coming in person, but still trying to do the social distancing and things like that. But I do think it does make sense for the foreseeable future for most associations to at least continue to allow the option to do the meetings virtually.
Okay. Virtual meetings, even though they are virtual, you should still follow the same parliamentary procedure as you would an in-person meeting. And that would be, having your agenda, your financial or budget review during the meeting, of course, nominations and voting, and then a question and answer session. There may be more for your particular association that you would be doing during your meeting, but these are just the basics that would still be expected even if you are having it virtual. Some etiquette suggestions when you are having a virtual annual meeting or even a virtual board meeting: to announce yourself as a board member when you join on, and also mute your microphone when you are not the main speaker or not speaking, in order to deflect from the background noise that could take the homeowners that are joining from listening to the person that is speaking. Don't create noise when you are unmuted. Turn off your television, radio, or phone when you are speaking. Just make sure that your phone is off, so in case you do receive a call, it's not distracting to the others. As a board member, we recommend turn on your camera. You're representing the association as a board member, and let's show the face of the board. I understand homeowners who come on at annual meetings and don't want to have their camera on. That's fine, and they just want to listen. But as a board member, we recommend you have your camera on. If you need to leave a meeting, you might want to make an announcement that you have something else you have to get to, and you'll be leaving the meeting a little early. And then your background should not be so cluttered, whereas it is distracting to others. If you need help with a digital background, reach out to your community association manager. We have a marketing team that can help you with that. If you're giving a presentation, use an online teleprompter, or the community association manager can also help you with sharing the screen and doing a PowerPoint. How can KMC help you with your Zoom meeting? Well, some of the things that we do is checking homeowners in before the meeting starts, and we verify that they are homeowners. And some of the ways that we do this is if they log in and it has their name, we can check that way. If they log in, it has a phone number or an email, we can verify that if their email or phone number is in our software system. If all three are not listed, or we do not see that member listed with the name that they are showing, then we will reach out one-to-one with that person to verify their name or their address, and then also verify that they are an actual owner of this association. So if they are, that's great. If not, or if they do not respond within 2 times of trying, then we do take them out of the meeting and move on from there. Other things are homeowners are always muted during the meeting. We allow for documents such as budgets or reports to be shared on the screen. We can take nominations virtually. We would unmute the person, allow them to give a short bio, and then mute them right after they're done. Voting can be done via polling, and to the right there is an example of a polling. So for example, if you have 2 positions open, but 3 people are running, then we would create the question from the community manager's side, which would say, please vote for 2 of the 3 members listed below for a 2-year term. And then we would send out the question, and the homeowners would vote. It tells us from our host screen how many people have voted and how many have not. We give it at least a minute. If we're still waiting on one person, we would probably do an announcement saying we're still waiting on one person to vote. And then once all the votes are in, this is what comes back to us, and it shows how the people voted. We do keep a copy of that for your records for your annual meeting. And then we would share that towards the end of the meeting. You can also do budgets this way of approval, yes or no. If you have a special amendment, the same thing. And then unmuting or checking the chat bar for question and answer is one of the things that KMC is doing in the background for your annual meeting. And we can also record the annual meeting as well and save that in your documents for your association. So what is the purpose of an annual meeting? This for your association can be found in the bylaws for your community. This is an example of bylaws for a community, and it states the purpose of this annual meeting is to elect board of directors. It may be in your bylaws that it states to elect board of directors and also pass a budget. It just depends what your bylaws state. So preparing for an annual meeting, what do your documents state and what needs to be included in the packet? We're going to get a little bit more specific in that in the upcoming slides, but just keep in mind what needs to be included in your annual meeting packet. That is something the board should work together on, and we'll discuss that a little bit. When and where should your annual meeting be held? So annual meetings, as in this example here, it states the annual meeting should be the second Tuesday of May in each calendar year. However, if there is a reason why you are not able to hold it, please try to hold it as close to that date as possible. Some documents will also state that it has to be held in a certain county, as you can see in this example here in the second paragraph, it states Marion County. Some get specific as to a certain township. So you need to be checking your documents where it states notice and place of meetings, as well as the dates of the annual meetings. When are they supposed to be held? If you also note that the notice has to go out 10 days prior to the date of such meeting in that second paragraph there, look for those specifics as well as to when the announcement needs to go out. For the annual meeting packet, what needs to be included? These are just some suggestions that we recommend. Of course, you would have your notice and agenda. We recommend sending out a copy of the minutes from the previous year, so that gives time for the homeowners to review the minutes, and then you could possibly vote on them of acclamation at the meeting. Also, a balance sheet and a budget, nomination form, and of course, a proxy. A lot of this will go into detail here in a little bit. Other suggestions we have is to save on mailing cost and do everything at once. You may, if you have a shortened version of rules and regulations, send those out as well. Also, a architectural approval form. There may be new homeowners throughout the year and are not aware of this form. This is a great time to send these examples or these rules and regulations and keep it fresh in everyone's mind. If you have a maintenance checklist, as most condos do, then that would be a time to send that out as well. And sending the packet, snail mail or email. As specified in the slides before, it stated that the packet had to be out at least 10 days before the meeting. Some will state that the packets have to be out at least 10 days before the meeting, no more than 30, or some will state at least 10 days and no more than 60. It just depends on your documents for your community. When you are preparing the packet, we hope that you take time to review it. The CAM would put it together and should send to you for approval, but at least give Kirkpatrick management 5 to 7 extra days to review this packet and be able to get it processed and put in the mail. That's not something that is easy for us to turn around in one day and have it in the mail. So please allow us time. That way, the regional manager looks it over and then they send it to the mailing department at KMC to review as well. And then they put it all together. So allow us this time, and therefore it's not rushed. When you rush, there can be mistakes. If you have meetings with amendments, it's probably best to try to do your amendments at an annual meeting, even though they're separate meetings. but to have all this in the same packet. Doesn't always work that way, but that is a suggestion. Kelly, do you have any information you want to share regarding the snail mail or email?
Yeah, so what we have recommended to associations, as Leah pointed out, you are required to send out notice based on what your governing documents provide. So if it discusses mail and delivery, then the association is going to be required to send it out via mail. What we typically recommend is also sending it out via email, as many owners prefer to do things electronically. So it's not a substitute, but it's in addition to ensure that as many of your owners are reached as possible. Now, in situations where an association is permitted to use electronic notices and owners have consented, you can do the substitution and email the documents.
Okay. So the annual meeting notice, what should be included just on your notice, on your cover letter? Of course, these following items, I'm not going to read each one of them, but we do recommend letting them know what would be the quorum, and that's why we want to strongly recommend, if you think you cannot attend the meeting, to please send in the attached proxy. If you want to announce the board members that may be leaving or up for renewal, that's up to you. Some will state a person's name and some will just say there are 2 positions up for renewal. And then the invitation to please join. In regards to the agenda, that again is usually typically found in your bylaws. Your bylaws would state, as an example here, what your agenda should be for the annual meeting. There may be some things that you're going to add to this, but these items here that are stated for this particular community have to be on the agenda. And I have the typical that are listed to the left, and just a few things of elections, other business, and closing of the meeting at the end. In regards to the other business, I pulled this example from an association. Other business would be the question and answer time. Notice that for this community, you need to send in your question 7 days prior to the annual meeting. That does make it easy for a board to know ahead of time what the question is and be prepared to answer it right then. Others do not typically show that. You have to have the questions in ahead of time. You may suggest that in your cover letter that it's, if you have any questions, please try to send them ahead of time to our community manager. But if they do that, that does help out because you can have the question ahead of time as just discussed. Some will not, and you may not be able to answer the question at the time when you don't know it ahead of time, and you would have to get back to them at a later date after the board discusses what the question is and the answer. Samantha, we'll take the time right now. Do you have any questions from the chat that we need to review?
We do have lots of questions. So let me just kind of start up at the top. Okay, Andrew Swenson asked, how do we handle proxy voting?
I am going to get into proxy voting in a little bit, so I can try to answer that in a few more slides.
Okay, and then Sonia Hallett wanted to confirm, do we just use or provide the Zoom links for annual meetings or regular meetings as well?
Yeah, both. For if you are having regular board meetings for Zoom, we would provide for both, right?
Okay, and she also asked, what can the board president do if other board members are refusing anything other than an in-person meeting?
If you're outvoted on that, then it sounds like you would be having an in-person meeting, or try to recommend doing a hybrid.
And Carlene asked, how can you have a virtual annual meeting if the bylaws don't provide for that?
Kelly, do you want to talk about that
Sure.
because of the ordinance? So go ahead.
Sure. So again, as I stated at the beginning of this presentation, the governor's orders that were in effect last year are no longer in place. So as we sit here today, there are no specific laws with respect to mandating that associations not conduct in-person meetings. So if your association feels comfortable proceeding and going right back to the old way of doing things right now and doing the meetings, that is permissible. However, the trend that we have seen, I would say the large majority of the associations that we're working with are doing either still entirely virtual meetings or some kind of hybrid where they're still allowing owners to participate via Zoom electronically, so that those who might be in certain groups who are concerned about being around others are still doing or attending the meetings. So I think was there a second part to that question as well?
Just that if the bylaws don't provide for it, how can you hold it?
Okay, well, and just to be clear, that's a really good question. Last year, as everybody moved into this virtual world of doing things, it was really all done sort of irrelevant to what your bylaws did and didn't provide. In other words, the majority of association bylaws say your meetings shall be conducted, in person at this, such and such time. Most associations were not conducting their meetings at the specific time required under the bylaws. They were conducting them virtually as opposed to in person. What our position on that is that while we recognize that the bylaws were not strictly adhered to because of the state of the pandemic, in light of governor's orders that were being issued in various states and different jurisdictions, our position is no court is going to invalidate a meeting that a reasonable association undertook to try to continue keeping their association moving, continuing to administer the association, but simply doing it a different way in light of the pandemic. So I still think, to this day, given where we are, and I know it's varies, from city to city and from county to county as to what levels people are at, but I still don't believe that a court is going to invalidate an association annual meeting, any actions taken at an annual meeting if they choose to continue to do things virtually.
Samantha, anything else?
Yes, we've got several more in here.
Okay.
Can you do electronic voting even if your documents don't allow for that?
So in that situation, we would obviously look to your governing documents. What the Homeowner Association Act provides is that you can submit proxies via electronic mail or other electronic means. So again, we would look at your governing documents to make sure it's not expressly prohibited. But the act does provide and allow for proxies to be submitted via electronic or other electronic means.
Thank you. Let's see. Can you set up voting forms using several different tools that are available, such as Google Forms? Sorry about that. With Google Forms, you can even do authentication by checking IP addresses via pre-voting registration.
I'm not familiar with voting. Okay, I'm not familiar with that type of voting. Kelly, have you?
I have not seen that, no.
I'm not, I really can't answer it.
Okay, let me move on to the next question. Are there any laws that prevent an HOA from moving to electronic communication only?
So currently, an association is required to conduct business as provided in your governing documents. So under the act, you would be required to follow your bylaws, your declaration and bylaws. What we would recommend is if as an association, you'd like to move to an electronic system of distributing notices, you can amend your governing documents. And again, as I said earlier, if you'd like to also ask owners to consent to receipt of documents and notices electronically, you can do that. But I think the best recommendation is to actually amend your governing documents.
Okay. Another person did chime in on the voting, just wondering what online voting options do we have?
Well, if you're holding the meeting virtually with KMC, we use Zoom for our meetings. So we have the polling through Zoom, which is electronic during the meeting. I have not done any polling outside of a meeting. And Kelly, have you outside of a meeting?
No, we're not.
Okay.
Okay, let me see. Yes, Linda, we'll be sending out the PowerPoint of the presentation afterwards, as well as a recording of the meeting. Just give us a little bit of time for that and we'll get that out to you. Okay, let's see. Brian Kessler said a separate email form can be useful so that it's not connected to the meeting IT logistics. And this way you can verify the email address, just again, in regards to validating voting.
Okay.
Laura said, do you have to address questions or topics that are submitted in writing if you think it's not appropriate?
If you think it's not appropriate, can mean is it if it's just something to deal with one unit, that person's unit, I would call that not appropriate. If it's something to do with the association as a whole, then it would be appropriate. It just depends on the question. But we typically, if we have someone raise a question like, I have a leak in my home and I haven't been able to get it fixed, we usually direct them to, after the meeting, talk to your community association manager. You know, we're just dealing with questions for that regards to the association as a whole. So if it's regarding just that person's, something with that person or their violation letter or their delinquency, that's not a time to discuss it with the association as a whole. And I'm going to go ahead and just move on really quickly and let you put some more. I'll come back to you.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I have put up 2 examples and I think you may have had time to review them already. So quickly, one is in a memo form and one is in a letter form as an example of a notice of a meeting. In regards to budget sheets and the balance sheet, that is something we recommend because it's just being transparent to your homeowners. It's good information to share. I like to send out a balance sheet showing what the balances in your operating and your reserves are for the homeowners so they can see that, as well as a budget year to date and a budget comparison for the previous year possibly. So those are just some examples to send out to your homeowners. Who approves the budget? It depends on your documents. Again, you need to look at your documents. Do the homeowners approve or does the board approve? That is in your bylaws and it states in there and under either the budget or during the annual meeting what they're voting on. So work with your community association manager. They can help you find that section if you need further assistance. In regards to the nomination form, it states an example here that the nomination form has to be back to the board secretary, which also could be the managing agent 7 days prior to the annual meeting. Some do not state that. So again, it just depends on your documents. You can also note in this example that the board of directors will be doing a voting by paper ballot, and the ballot shall contain the name of each person nominated to serve on the board, and then the homeowner has to sign the ballot. So your documents also get specific on how you vote, if you're doing it by ballot or even if you have to sign it. Not all documents are like this. You just have to look at your documents. Kelly, do you have any input?
So this is sort of been kind of a complicated issue. I've had a lot of questions about this year. So as you mentioned, we're really looking at the governing documents to provide an explanation as to what the nomination process is. I just reviewed a document last week for an association up in Northern Indiana, and there was a very complex process as far as there was actually a nominating committee that had to actually nominate the members. Then the nomination forms had to be presented. So as we keep sort of harping on in this presentation, we're always going to start with looking at your governing documents and going along with whatever is provided in your governing documents. We really do see some very varying instructions as far as nominations. You know, some associations, it's very casual. You can just show up, nominate people from the floor. Some are really, really specific, as I mentioned, where there's a whole timeline as far as first there's a nominating committee, then the nominations are due in advance of the meeting, then the voting documents are sent out. So anytime we're consulted on this, it's just such a fact-specific issue, but we always revert back to your governing documents.
Right. And then this is an example of a nomination form. Your documents usually don't get specific of what your nomination form needs to say. That's just a board decision. But of course, we always recommend that you have where they can print their name, their address, and signature line. So that's something for the board to review. The next up is the proxy. The proxy has specific information that Kelly's going to review here in a little bit that has to be on the form according to Indiana code that was brought in 2016. This example here states where the meeting is to be held, and if they're going to appoint a certain person, the line is blank, or if it's left blank, then it falls to the board president for this particular association. So you do have to sign and submit and send back. Please keep in mind that if you bring a person's proxy in and they did not put your name in the blank, so let's say Harriet down the road gave her neighbor John her proxy to come to the annual meeting and vote for her. But if he shows up and Harriet didn't put John's name in the blank, he cannot stand there and put his name in there because she's already signed it. So you can't change the proxy after it has been signed. It would be invalid. And Kelly, do you want to go over the language?
Sure. So, and this is something we really do want to stress how important it is to make sure you're having your proxy form reviewed, because the statute is very, very specific as to all of the requirements that must be included in a proxy, or it can be invalidated as a matter of law. So the first item that must be included is the name and address of the individual who's giving their vote. In addition, we need the name of the individual who can exercise the member's proxy. So this is kind of the point in a presentation where I always remind owners, a proxy is not the same thing as a ballot. And I think a lot of times over the years, people confuse that. You know, they show up with a proxy form and say, here's my ballot, and vice versa. A proxy form is the actual document where you're giving your vote or you're giving your directive over to someone else to vote on your behalf. You know, I, Kelly Elmore, cannot attend the meeting, so I'm giving my directive to John Smith to come to the meeting and vote it on my behalf. So they really are two separate and distinct items. In addition, the date on which the proxy is given, it is absolutely crucial that the proxy be dated by the owner who's executing the proxy so that we know when it was actually executed, because as I'll discuss in a minute, there is a deadline on these proxies. The date of the meeting for which the proxy is given. So if your annual meeting is coming up on October 1st, it's going to state in the proxy the date of the meeting at which it's given. And also, one thing that we like to clarify as attorneys is whether or not the owner is giving a directive that if the meeting has to be continued. So if you get to your meeting and for whatever reason you didn't reach quorum or you didn't have enough votes, that the proxy clearly states that the proxy continues to be valid for any continuation of that meeting, for that vote on that issue, so that the association can continue to use it. I just had an association a few weeks ago where they didn't do that and they spent a lot of time collecting proxies only to realize that meeting date had already come and gone. They now couldn't use the proxies for any continuation of the meeting, and they had to start the process over. So really, really important that you want to make sure that that's on there. In addition to the signature, we will need an affirmation under penalties of perjury that the individual signing the proxy has the authority. In other words, that the owner really is the owner of the lot or the unit and therefore has the authority to vote on behalf of that ownership. You can also state in the proxy that this proxy is limited to just a specific vote. So I can say, I, Kelly Elmore, I'm giving my vote to John Smith to cast my votes in the annual meeting that's going to be conducted on October 1st and any continuation thereof. And also to cast my vote on behalf of the budget issue, so there you can expand the proxy. The most important thing is that it's just very clear as to what you are giving your proxy holder the right to do on your behalf. So just know this issue comes up not that much. I think maybe in 15 years, I've only seen this a few times. Individual owners could, in theory, create their own proxy form. We've seen it in a few circumstances, but that proxy form has to also follow and contain the requirements set forth in the act. So just know if you ever have an owner who says, here, I created my own proxy form, then the association is only required to use it or can only use it if it does contain all of those required items.
Okay. So as board members, you need to be proactive in trying to get quorum. Don't just hope that you show up and people are going to either show up or, hand in their proxies on their own. The best thing is to have signage, do email blast. I suggest email blast the day of the meeting, also at least a week before the meeting, and your community association manager can do that for you. Other things to suggest is maybe a giveaway of gift cards, having food. I have one association where they meet in a side room of a restaurant and they provide a meal. It just depends on what your budget is. And then the biggest part that we see the best way to get quorum is going door to door to get your proxy signed, and that's by board members. I know in recent times it is very difficult to do that and nobody answers the door. I can understand that. So mainly the email blast and the signage. And then Kelly, do you have any input?
Yeah, and this will also hopefully address, because I know there were a lot of questions about, well, what kind of online techniques can we use to be able to get our votes? And I know quorum is a concern. So two things to note about the proxies. So as we mentioned, the date is really important on the proxies. Under Indiana law, they're good for 180 days. So again, we want to make sure that you're able to use those proxies. So if you have to continue your meeting, you're trying to achieve quorum. And if we weren't clear earlier, quorum is obtained through the proxy forms. You don't need, the over 20% or whatever the quorum is in your association. You don't need all those people there in person. The actual proxies count. So if one person shows up in person, but you have 30% of your association provided proxies, you've established your quorum. The other key thing to note is that the act allows owners to submit a proxy by hand delivery, mail, fax, or electronic mail or other electronic means. So kind of going back to a lot of those questions about, well, how are we going to be able to do this? How are we going to be able to collect enough votes? And what can we do as far as allowing people to submit votes electronically? The proxies can be submitted by electronic mail or other means. So as we talk about being proactive, getting to your quorum, you really want to do a campaign to get out there and get people to email back their proxies in order to achieve your quorum and actually get to the vote and resolution of your issue.
Right. Okay, Samantha, just a good break time. So any other questions?
Yes, we do still have several other questions. I'll get through as many as I can. I know we'll need to stop and just the next couple of minutes for Danielle to be able to announce our gift card winners, but let's go ahead and and get what we can get answered, and anything else I assume you'll send out via email.
Right.
Perfect. Okay, so Geraldine asked, she has covenants that are signed and filed with the city, but not bylaws. Do those bylaws still need to be adhered to?
Kelly, I'll let you.
So under Indiana law, only certain documents are required to be recorded. And we have seen this issue where, certainly your governing documents, your declaration need to be recorded. Those are covenants that run with the land. And when you run a property index number search, those documents attached to your property and are required to be recorded. Unlike declarations, bylaws and rules and regulations, other things like that are not required to be recorded. But the question is whether or not they were properly approved. So sometimes we do see situations where, some owners have certain sets of documents, but no one can establish they were ever formally approved. And again, we have to look to your governing documents to determine who was the proper authority to approve them, whether it was the original declarant when they were running your association prior to the turnover, whether it was something the board could approve, or whether it was something that required an owner vote. So generally, again, we would look to see how they were approved and if they were approved with the right authority.
Okay. Samantha?
Brian Kessler is asking, where's the law or the executive order that allows for an online annual meeting, and has it been challenged?
No, well, as far as I know, I've not heard of any challenges. Again, because I think, everyone understood in the past year, anyone challenging an association trying to comply with not just orders, but CDC guidelines. So I think there's been some questions about, well, what did the orders say and what are the mandates? I don't, those have expired. So there's no law saying you now must conduct any meetings virtually. But I do think what a lot of associations are adhering to and are paying attention to are CDC guidelines. So again, it's not a one size fits all. Varying associations are doing different things. I know many associations, even though they had concerns about individual gatherings and large groups, what they did is they moved the meetings outside where they normally would have done them inside. So that, sort of negated the concern that they had, and they had people separated. So, but no, there are not laws that are in place. But in the past year, even when the ordinances were in place and the various governor's orders were in effect, we didn't see anyone challenge, because quite honestly, the courts, when you think about where you would go to challenge, the courts were so impacted by COVID. All the courts had to move to an online forum. And right now, a lot of the courts are doing a hybrid themselves. So, essentially coming into challenge an association, conducting things virtually. I think a court would also look at what their own practices were and just trying to keep people safe.
Okay, and Samantha, we'll take one more and then I'll try to do wrap up and go back to you again.
Okay, thank you. So Geraldine had another question about the budget. She has several additions to recommend as they discuss each new line item. Do they vote on the line items, or do they discuss and vote when there's a final budget agreed upon? And can the budget be changed during the meeting?
Well, you're not voting on a line item. You have to vote on the budget overall. So if there's overwhelming discussion that they want an amount changed or something changed for a reserve expense, that can be changed, but you're not going line by line. It's just a budget overall. I mean, yes, there will be discussion about it, but it's voting on the overall budget. And then I'll get back into this and come right back to you, okay? Okay. So the day of the meeting setup, we at Kirkpatrick Management, your community association managers, are here to support you, and we will arrive early. We hope that the board would arrive early too, to help set up the meeting area if you are meeting in person. If there's things that you do need before the meeting, please let us know so we can have that available. And the manager will have sign-in sheets, agendas, ballots if needed, information that you want passed out, and pens at the sign-in desk. And then we recommend that the board sit up front at the meeting, and at least the board president or vice president run the meeting and show that you are in charge. You do know what's going on in the community. In the past, I've had some communities that don't even want to sit up front, and I think it comes across wrong to the homeowners, like the board isn't involved and Kirkpatrick is the only one running the show. So we strongly recommend be the face at the front, and regarding the financial section, try to have the treasurer review that, or if they feel uncomfortable, then you can have the community association manager run that section. In regards to the quorum, well, first of all, before you start the meeting, do you have a quorum? Make sure you know what the quorum is. And if you don't have a quorum, I'm going to have Kelly talk about that. What would be the next step if you don't have a quorum? What should they do?
So essentially, you'll continue to run everything as the status quo. Unfortunately, getting back to the quorum and an email and maybe even potentially door knocking campaign, you'll just need to continue to petition your owners to submit their votes. But essentially, with respect to an annual meeting, the board members will continue on without regard to whether or not the term, if it's a 1-year term or 2-year term, and you're now in a place where you're going past that term. The law essentially states you need to have quorum in order to formally take any action at a meeting. And if you don't have the quorum, you essentially don't have the ability to take any lawful action at the meeting.
Okay. Kelly, is it right that if they don't have a quorum, can they announce at the meeting, we will try to have another meeting and announce a date, a time, and a place? Do they have to do an announcement again through mail?
So what we would recommend is when you're at the meeting, if the board is prepared, that actually probably would be helpful, is to be prepared in advance, to have the next meeting date already ready to go. Again, being mindful of, you've got 180 days on the proxy form. So, and remember, many of the owners might have signed those proxies 30 days or 20 days in advance of the meeting. So make sure you are calculating that date that's leading up to the meeting, because it's not 180 days from the meeting, it's 180 days from the date the person signed it. So I would recommend the board be prepared, announce the new meeting date, but I would also recommend sending out a notice of, this is a continuation of the meeting that we conducted on, October 1st, we did not achieve quorum, so now the continued meeting is going to be on this date.
Does that have to be by mail, or can they do it by email if they've announced it at the meeting?
I believe it would be valid if the association simply announces it and sends it out by email. Yeah. That said, I think sometimes we're in we can find ourselves in a place where some people will challenge pretty much anything. And if they're really trying hard to invalidate what the association or the board is trying to do or pass, or the members who are getting elected, if you want to really negate any potential challenge, you can remail everything.
Okay. And then going to the next slide, the treasurer's report and budget presentation, as stated earlier, it's best if the treasurer can do this type of report, but if they don't feel comfortable, this community association manager can handle this section as well. What happens if the budget is not approved? I'm going to have Kelly review that in a minute. Voting on a budget, we just discussed that in one of the questions. It has to be as a whole. So Kelly, if they don't pass the budget, you'll find in the documents, and again, you have to look at your documents. What does it state? That they could, if they don't have quorum to pass the budget, they could raise the budget no more than 10%. But can you review that further?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So some associations will just continue on with the prior budget until they can establish quorum to do the increase. Again, looking at your documents to ensure you actually know, because there's a nuance in the Homeowner Association Act with respect to associations that were incorporated prior to July 1st, 2009 versus those that were after 2009 with respect to who is permitted to actually approve budgets, whether it's the board or whether it's the actual members of the association. In any event, there are also restrictions with respect to if you're looking to increase your budget more than 110%. So again, we want to be mindful of that, but we'll be looking at your governing documents again to see who would be authorized at the meeting and to make what decision.
Okay. And then going to the next slide. This is in regards to ballots. So in particular, the nominations for your board members. So some will state you can take nominations from the floor. Some will state that you have to have nominations in by a certain date, but then there's the hybrid. Some will state that you can take nominations from the floor, but then it states you have to have nominations in 7 days prior. So look at your documents, see what it states. And ballots cannot be emailed in. They have to be done at the meeting. And how are they counted? Does it state if it has to be signed by the person voting? Look at your documents again. And in regards to the count, it's to help count how homeowners voted on the ballot. If it has to be signed, then we typically will put a sticker or put on there the name of the homeowner. So when they come in and check in and we hand them their ballot, we'll put a sticker on the back. And especially if your community, your votes are by percentage, that helps us with the percentage vote, which I'll go into in a little few slides here. This is an example of a ballot. For this community, there were already nominations, but then the documents also stated that they could take nominations from the floor. So we left a couple blank lines and then the signature for the owner. If your documents state they don't have to sign, then we wouldn't put that in there. So, and how to vote in regards to voting, acclamation. An acclamation you could do if you have 2 open positions and only 2 people running, unless, then this is only if your documents do not state it has to be by ballot. So if it doesn't state that it has to be by ballot, then you could do an acclamation only if there's 2 spots and 2 people running, for example. If you have 2 spots but 3 people running, then you would need to do a ballot. Is it a percentage vote in your documents? Do your votes count by percentage for each address? Then we have a spreadsheet that would be put together and allows us to accumulate those votes and process it that way. We strongly recommend that you do the voting towards the beginning of the meeting, probably right after or right before you start talking about the financial section. That allows us to put together the votes, because if you do it at the end, then people are waiting and you tend to get in a hurry on the count. So try to do that towards the beginning of the meeting. A reminder, not a lot, but some homeowners think that they are voting on the position that this person is running for, that they think they're voting for a treasurer or who's going to be board president. That is not the case. They are only voting for a person to be on the board, and then the board will do a separate election of who is going to be the president or the treasurer, etc. That would either be done right after the meeting or the next meeting of the board following the annual meeting. And then who counts the votes? I always recommend that you have either a board member or a KMC representative and then a homeowner and the count of the vote. Kelly, anything you wanted to review there?
No, I think all of that was very good. I do like the suggestion about having, varying people who are there to oversee the counting of the ballots. Usually I also recommend, if there's anyone who's a candidate and wants to, be present for the tabulation or the counting of the votes, I have no issue with.
Okay. So regarding other business and then the closing of the meeting, how would you close the meeting? If you have a new person that has been voted on the board, ask them to stay after and have a brief meeting with them about when your next meeting is and give them your contact information, as well as KMC will ask for their contact information so we can get them in our system as a board member. If you close the meeting, if you have an annual meeting followed by a special meeting for a proposed amendment, you would need to close the annual meeting and then state we are now opening a meeting for a special meeting for the amendment. For special meetings, if you don't have a quorum, then you need to table that meeting and do not state that you're going to close the meeting, but you're going to table that meeting. Kelly, any input on that though?
Yes. So again, it's all about what's in the proxy. We want to be very clear when we do the proxy that it's valid for any continuation of the meeting. Again, that proxy is going to be very clear about the directive that you're giving to your proxy holder to vote on your behalf. And as you said, the key thing is do not close the meeting. If you want to continue the vote, if you want to continue to use those proxies, we just cannot close the meeting and simply continue it so that the proxies can still be used, because we have, again, unfortunately had a number of associations who accidentally closed the meeting and didn't continue it, and therefore the vote was closed. So those are the key points.
Okay. Other annual meeting concerns. So if you have a concern that there could be confrontations, homeowners, they get upset if there is a large increase in the dues, or there could be security issues and they don't think that there's enough being done for the association or for them. We can help you with having a security person there or somebody from the local police department as well. Just reach out to your CAM. Reasons that it may be needed are listed there, especially special assessments gets a big turnout and people can sometimes get vocal about their concerns. If it gets into just a shouting match, I recommend that the board president just state that this meeting is not being productive and that they should close the meeting if it's towards the end, if there's still voting going on. But try to listen to the person's concerns, but if it's just a repeated question of the same thing over and over, we need to try to move that on and explain to them, if you do not allow for other business or for other people to talk, we're going to have to ask you to leave the meeting. If there's other concerns about that, reach out to your community manager to try to be prepared ahead of time, although we never know what's going to come up. But if you think that there is going to be an issue, discuss it with the board ahead of time and discuss how to prepare for that. Now, even though this is the end of our presentation, we're going to go into some question and answer. And I just want to state that both Kelly and I are on the executive board of the local chapter for the Community Association Institute. We do have a golf outing that we wanted to promote. If you're interested in attending a golf outing, here's some information on that we will leave up for a couple minutes. If you're interested, the email to sign up for that is listed to the left. If down the road before this, you think, oh, you know what, I think I do want to go, just reach out to Leah, me, and I can help you get signed up for that. But we think it's going to be a great event. Even if you're not a golfer and you want to come later in the day and have dinner and a couple drinks, you can do that as well. So it's at the Twin Lakes Golf Club in Carmel. But we'll turn it over back to Samantha and we'll take some question and answers.
Thanks, Leah. I know we are a little over time already, so we'll take maybe 5 minutes for questions. I've definitely got more than 5 minutes worth of questions here in the chat. So everything else, I'll make sure I send over to you, Leah, so that you can work on that. So we'll make sure we answer all your questions, even if we don't get to read them out right now. Okay, there were a couple messages in here regarding SurveyMonkey as an option for voting, proxy voting, and I'll just go ahead and take this one. I think that that is something that you'll want to discuss on an individual level. It's not going to work for every single community, but it is certainly an option.
Okay.
Let's see. So we're in the process of amending our covenants and have found some fairly inexpensive sites that manage HOA voting. Thank you, Jeff. Let's see. Chris is just, he wants a little bit more information on online voting and wants that sent out if we can. It's one of the main reasons that he joined. So he would like an email back regarding online voting and options.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. Mary asked, can ballots selecting board members sent in advance signed by homeowners be used in lieu of a proxy?
Kelly, go ahead.
No, so unfortunately, the proxy is the only document that can be sent in advance. The ballots themselves are the documents that you use when voting in person at the meeting.
Thank you. Chuck is asking, when holding a virtual meeting, if someone is unwilling to identify themselves, can the host dismiss them from the meeting?
On a virtual meeting?
Yes, on a virtual meeting.
Yes, KMC will reach out to that person at least a couple times to try to find out who they are, their name and the address. And if they do not respond, we do take them out of the meeting.
Okay, let's see. Rebecca asked, if no one nominates themselves prior to the meeting, is it legal to allow attendees to nominate themselves at the meeting?
Yes, as long as it's not prohibited in your governing documents.
Okay. And while you're looking up the next question, please keep in mind that KMC representatives, your community managers, are not legal representatives. So it is best, and a lot of these things that we have talked about, especially if you're talking about amendments, are specific things that are not stated in your documents. When it's not stated, to get a clear answer, always look to your legal representative. You may not have KSN as your legal representative. You may have someone else, but please reach out to your legal representative for verification of everything. We at KMC, we're not legal representatives.
Thanks, Leah. Okay, Dennis asked, wasn't there a state of Indiana change that were on the requirement for a quorum due to the difficulty in getting a quorum?
Kelly, I'm not aware.
I'm not aware of that.
Right, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, so do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, one more.
Okay, my neighborhood has duplexes and individual houses. The builders set the dues for individual homes a little higher than the duplexes. If we do a % increase, is that an equal assessment?
Kelly.
So we would have to look at your documents to see if it's a pro rata spread out to everyone equally, or if it's based on any kind of percentage of ownership.
Okay. As Samantha has stated, we will email you responses to your question. Please note, and Samantha, if you can throw this out in the chat, we have an education day tomorrow for the community association managers. So I will try to look at some of these questions. I may not get all of you answered, and we will get you answers by the end of day next Tuesday, unfortunately too, but not unfortunately for me. I am taking a vacation day on Friday. So please allow us to the end of business day next Tuesday, the 7th. And then Danielle, I'll turn it back over to you. And I just want to say thank you, Kelly Elmore, for coming on. She's such a great speaker. Kelly, you have a CAI seminar that you're going to be teaching the end of this month. Yep. Regarding annual meetings. If anyone is interested in that information, please email either of us and we can get that to you.
September 22nd, yes.
Thank you. Great. Thanks for coming. Danielle?
Okay, thank you guys. That was really good. So just to reiterate, we will have a PDF of the PowerPoint and we will email that to all the attendees tonight. You guys are free to share that with the other board members who may not have been able to attend. We will also have a link to the video of this presentation, but that may take us a couple of weeks. Once we get that, we'll upload that to KMC Connect. And if you guys need help accessing that, just reach out to your community association manager. Leah and Kelly have their email addresses up here on the screen. So if you didn't get your question in the chat, jot down their emails. You can always email them directly. And so now just to wrap up, our 2 gift card winners, $50 Visa gift card, we will mail these to you. So just keep an eye out for that. They are Greg Baldoff and Robert Kincaid. So thank you both for attending. We appreciate it. With that being said, that is all we have. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Leah and Kelly. It was a great presentation and we appreciate you guys coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And congratulations, Bob Kincaid, my realtor from a long time ago. Great job. So everyone have a great evening and thank you again.
Thanks.